Hey everybody, welcome to the PeBL presentation here at the Spring Symposium talking about i- innovative industrial applications in AI. Today I'm going to be talking about PeBL, the personalized ebooks for learning. This project focuses on next generation ebooks that include adaptivity and data-rich learning technologies. So first of all, I'm going to jump in and start telling us what is PeBL. At its core, PeBL is an open source specification that allows us to take current EPUB technology and extend it and add a whole bunch of new stuff. We bring together the advantages of ebooks, the advantages of regular books, the power of tablets, the web, and other mobile learning technologies all directly into the ebook wrapper that you're all used to using and that you've seen many times in education. The idea here is to allow you to do all kinds of stuff, and we're going to go through what that stuff is within your ebooks without losing the familiarity, the ease of use, and some of the portability and accessibility. And we're going to talk about all of that, and then we're just going to show you some technology, because I think at the end of the day, showing is always better than telling. So first of all, PeBL itself is an open source project that enhances ebooks with data-rich pedagogy. What that means is that anybody can use the PeBL specification. It's available. All of this, everything that we're going to show you, is available at pebblproject.com. In addition to the open source PeBL project, we're also going to be showing you an authoring tool, because just showing you backend technology is great, but if you actually want to use it, you'll need to be able to get your hands on it. And that's going to be through the PeBL Pro product that allows you to produce PeBL ebooks quickly and easily. Here you can see this is just a screenshot of a PeBL cybersecurity training, and you'll notice there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. There are discussions, there are samples, and there's also a lot of adaptivity under the hood. So let's dive in and talk about some of the major things that PeBL adds to ebooks and why it's different. First of all, PeBL is completely adaptive. It's designed from the ground up to be part of a total learning architecture. And what that means is that external systems can control your content. They can morph it dynamically. In this case, we have what's called content morphing. So we've identified a basic and a detailed version of the same text. And depending on what the learner's done within the book, what the instructor sees on their dashboard, or what's being controlled by an external adaptive system, the content can switch between these two different pieces of text automatically. This kind of fine-grained control allows for all new kinds of pedagogy. It lets you realize that different learners don't just learn at different paces, but sometimes are better affected by different kinds of explanations. It also enables multilingual controls and all kinds of other dynamic changes that, frankly, we haven't even thought of yet. But the core capability here is dynamic replacement of text controlled by things that the student does, instructor desires, or external systems. And by the way, external systems don't have to be on separate devices. They can live right next to PeBL on a tablet, a phone, a desktop, wherever you're using your PeBLized learning content. Second of all, PeBL is collaborative, and that means that students and instructors can collaborate directly within the content. This includes things like discussions, dynamic polling. So the instructor during a class can send out a poll, students can answer. It all updates in real time. It has dashboards and visualizations for all of these features. These discussions can be limited to the class, the group. They follow privacy and security, which means that PII will never be shared or stored. You can set these different discussions to be just personal or just between a student and an instructor. All of this kind of customization is there to allow the instructional designer to really think long and hard about how they want a student to interact with other members of a class, team, broadly distributed learning experience. In one example, PeBL's been used to support adults doing continuing professional development internationally, using both simultaneous training and asynchronous training. So they can share discussions, they can have a conversation in real time, or they can leave messages or comment on content, and those comments can be picked up and looked at by other users in the future. Third, PeBL supports equity and portability. And what this means is, first of all, PeBL works both online and offline. That means that just because you have adaptive content doesn't mean you lose the ability to reach out to populations that don't have great internet access. PeBL's been used in field work out in the all over farms in the US through the National Extension Foundation. PeBL's worked with inner city and rural school programs. The goal here is to make sure that a student can grab that PeBL ebook, work on it locally, and as soon as they have an internet connection, it will sync all of the data, make whatever adaptive updates. And if that adaptivity engine lives next to PeBL on the device, even local adaptivity continues while the student's offline. In addition, student-based dynamic changes to the content, so things that happen based on student interactions, like answering a question correctly or incorrectly, responding to a fill in the blank question, doing any of these sorts of things, those all continue to work offline as well as online. In addition to the online, offline, and portable components, PeBL's fully 508 compliant. So we've just gone through a large audit. We've made sure that everything that's needed for 508 compliance can come out of PeBL publishing tools, and that PeBL eBooks support everything that's necessary. That includes image tags, being able to change the size of text, all of these sorts of things. In addition, PeBL partners with open educational resources. So we're fully committed to the OER community. We want to make sure that accessibility isn't just something that stops at the ability to author content, but extends to the ability to get content. The PeBL project wants to make sure that education's available wherever, whenever, however. That's one of our sort of internal mottos that we always check for when we're really making a new release or making any updates to PeBL. And finally, everything that's done in PeBL eBooks is fully trackable. That means that every piece of PeBL content has XAPI data flowing back from PeBL to a total learning architect, so to a TLA, to a learning repository, to a learning record system, connected to some sort of learning ecosystem, and that fuels instructor dashboards, that fuels analytics, that fuels anything you want to do with XAPI. And you'll notice in this diagram, there's a little double-headed arrow going back and forth from analytics. And that's because PeBL doesn't just flow XAPI out. It also ingests data coming in from other systems. External systems can control PeBL books. They can do things like determine where the book opens, do that adaptive learning we talked about earlier, but they can also have a learner profile, so they can know things about the learner. For example, let's say you have some multilingual content, and using PeBL content morphing, you include both English and Spanish language content. Well, if you know something about your learner, PeBL can ingest that learner's profile and update the content, switching between English and Spanish as makes sense, or making the content more or less difficult. For example, let's imagine Judy, our PeBL product owner, who's about to give us a deep dive and presentation on PeBL, is really an excellent learner, and she's going super quickly through content. Using those dynamic and adaptive pieces, we might insert an additional chapter into Judy's PeBL book. In addition, we know a few additional things about Judy because we're hooked up to a learning ecosystem. We know that in her engineering class, Judy's really excelling, but we also know that right now she's on chapter 3 in her history class, which is studying the Industrial Revolution. And because of that, the additional chapter that we give her might be on basic mechanics of the loom and how mechanized weaving has changed in the last 100 years. Starting with hand looms, moving to things that are human powered, to steam power, all the way up to mass production that we have today. This kind of linking learning across subjects and dynamic changing of content really helps PeBL bring a classroom experience together. From here, though, I'm going to stop talking to you, and we're going to jump into an actual demonstration. So I'm going to hand the screen back over to you, Judy, and let you show us a little bit about both PeBL content and how we make this darn stuff.
Thank you, Elliot. So I'm going to jump into, not that screen actually. I'm going to show, first of all, a little bit of PeBL content. I'm going to show you some of my favorite features, focusing heavily on content morphing, which was the feature that Elliot mentioned that really is at the heart of the adaptivity in PeBL's nature. And I know that that's what we're focusing on a lot in this conference. And it's a hugely important issue for effective training and education. So we're going to focus there, but I'll show you some of the other features that are in here in this as well. The PeBL book that we're looking at right now was created for the Marine Corps. It was part of a usability test that we did with them to test out some PeBL features that were coming to fruition. This is right now, actually, everything that you see on this page, as visual as it is non-interactive. But as we go on well, other than the many features that are available in the reader and in the menu bar, as far as the content, we don't have any interactivity in the content here. But as we go on, there are some very interactive components. You see, for example, just like in anything on the web, you can do a link out to other content that might be hosted in another place or might be part of the PeBL book itself. You have the ability to actually insert places that have curated collections of curated resources as well. So that's something that if you have a collection of several things that might be relevant at that place in the book, you can use that as well. You have the ability to give feedback to the instructor or the person who created the book. This is something, at least on the corporate side, that we complain about a lot, is having a broken feedback loop. We don't get a lot of feedback, but PeBL has interactions that actually allow you to do that. Elliot mentioned discussions as well. There are discussions that you can place contextually through the book, or just sort of have hang out at the book level, so that people can have ongoing discussions about what's going on. You can also do short answer, which might be a little bit more discussion based, or might be more of a reflection question for the student to think about something, give their opinion about something, or create a work product of some sort, like an action plan, or a business email, or whatever it is that the content is geared toward them teaching. So I'm just going to do a little a response here. And submit it. And you're going to see all of these things that I'm doing here. Oh, I'm going to give feedback as well. I like this content, or no, I changed my mind. I don't like this content, and this is boring. So all of the things that I'm doing here, we're going to go check and make sure that we see in the tracking data as well. So we'll take a look at the LRS, or Learning Record Store. But the thing that I really want to focus on here is this little paragraph right here. So this is the section on cognitive readiness. And we decided to put this in content morphing because the original content was written at such a high level. It was way above the expected reading level of our audience, mostly because the sentences were really kind of long and convoluted. So for the key concepts throughout this PeBL book, we wrote simplified versions of the content. Most of the same content is there, just at a lower reading level, more accessible for this audience. And then we put them in what we call content morphing blocks. So this paragraph that you see right here is the basic version of the explanation of cognitive readiness, which is one of the key concepts in this section. And you see this little dial over to the right. And we didn't teach anybody how to do this, but they noticed that there's a dial that you can dial up from basic to advanced and access the fully advanced version of the content that's like beyond, you know, college reading level, just mostly, like I said, because of the complexity of sentences. Anyway, this is one aspect of why you might use content morphing. It might be that some people are more comfortable with a higher reading level than others. It might be because some people are at a different mastery level than others. So some of the things that Elliot mentioned as well were language. You might use content morphing for language or for localization. Perhaps different content is relevant in different geographies. Or for example, for role. If it's more of a training environment, sometimes we see content morphing used to present different content to a manager versus an individual contributor. There are all sorts of ways that you might want to, or all sorts of reasons that you might want to adapt the content. And content morphing as a feature really sits at the heart of that. So let's just go ahead and dial this back down to basic. And I'm going to go over here to my LRS or Learning Record Store and refresh and look at some of the things that I did. I morphed this content. I experienced the content at different levels. I did a little bit of paging around. I gave some feedback in the feedback area. I liked and then I disliked the feedback, and then I typed in this is scoring. So all of the things that I just did in the PeBL were recorded right here in the Learning Record Store, and I can derive any amount of data, insight from that, because everything that the learner does really is tracked here using XAPI. So that is a little bit of an idea of how those features look when they're actually implemented in the book. Let's focus in on content morphing specifically and talk a little bit about the authoring experience. Now, PeBL actually is available as an open source project. If you can code, if you can put all of the code together and are comfortable doing that, working with HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript, all of that is available on the internet for you to go get. However, we're also working on an authoring tool to help everyone who is not a coder put all of these things together themselves. It's actually in the beta right now, so this is not even the final presentation of it. I'm using the CDC's zombie preparedness materials for educators because why not? Basically, we're going to put together a PeBL that is where some of the content is focused differently depending on the audience that you are. So I'm going to go into the first chapter, and this particular piece of content is on community preparedness. I can see in the content that different community roles might have different responsibilities. So I'm going to create a content morphing block that presents different content for community leaders versus the public. Excuse me. All right, so let's go back here. Excuse me, call this community preparedness. And we will take just excuse me, just the sections on, sorry, my mouse is being a little bit wonky, on community leaders versus the public. So what I'm going to do is go over here to interactions and add a content morphing area. So this little control is what we've replaced the dial with. So same thing there. It's put in my content morphing, and the two levels or options that I'm going to give it are community leaders and the public. Okay, so those are going to go in as the different options that they can select from. You can see that there's one content area here that's being put in for community leaders and one for the public. So all I have to do is copy and paste in that content. And I'll do the same thing over here. Okay. So now I have a content morph. I'm just going to take out this text right here. So now I have a content morph that can switch to present content for different audiences. And I'm going to go into the preview just to see how this is working. This is starting with the content for the community leaders, and I can switch it to the public. Now, I may or may not leave it where the learner can actually control that morph. Notice back when we put this in, you have the ability to turn off that control icon. So let's talk about when you might want to do that. It's a very nitty gritty thing, but if it's in a larger context of how your adaptability is working, it may be that you want the student or the learner to be able to control that and say, this is too high level for me. I want to read this part in Spanish, whatever. You may leave that entirely up to the learner control. Or you may have learner control, but it happens at the beginning of the learning experience and they don't touch it again for the rest. So maybe I would put in a button at the beginning of this PeBL book that has somebody tell the PeBL whether they are a community leader or just a general member of the public. And then multiple places, one place or multiple places throughout the learning experience are going to adapt or morph based on that selection that they made. So that's kind of the second way, is that the learner makes the selection, but it's in one place. They may forget about it. It's just going to happen throughout the rest of the book. The content is going to morph to their preferences or to their needs. Another thing that can happen is that adaptivity happens locally, as Elliot was mentioning, where it's happening as a response to the other things that they're doing in the book. They may be indirectly adapting certain content without even knowing it. So for example, let's say that most of the time they're going through and answering all of the questions correctly that review the material that is covered. But in one area, they had to take 2 tries, or maybe they couldn't even get it after 2 tries. Because of that, some content adapts on the back end silently. They don't necessarily even know it. That adds a remediation section that, excuse me, that does a review or takes a different approach to teach the content that they're still lacking. Or perhaps it adapts so that they cannot continue until they're able to show mastery in another way. So that all of that is happening locally, but when you kind of zoom out and expand your ideas about what you want that adaptivity to be based on, you can, as Elliot said, base it on a learner profile, base it on things that the learner has done or have been recorded in other systems, like a skills and competency management system, or any number of things that might influence what we know about the learner and what their needs are when they're coming into this PeBL. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Elliot to wrap anything up.
Sure. So first of all, thank you guys for bearing with us. Usually we do these presentations, with everybody and have some fun audience participation, but because of coronavirus, this is pre-recorded, but we really look forward to answering your upcoming questions live. Just a few last thoughts before we go to Q&A. You can always check out the open source PeBL project at pebblproject.com or pebblproject.org. And you can also check out the upcoming PeBL Pro authoring release at pebble.pro. .pro is actually a domain, so you can go there, I promise. And if you have any additional questions or just want to know how you can get involved, how you can get your hands on this, email us at pebble@edgeworks.com. We're really looking forward to hearing from you and are excited to share some new adaptive technology that helps take your traditional eBooks and make them really next generation exciting learning platform. So thanks, and let's go to Q&A.